Welcome back to another episode of Raising the Bar, TKJ Podcast. Today, in this episode, we hear from Turner Liotta, owner of Sandia Window Cleaning. Turner, how are you today, my friend?
Good, good, man. Thank you for having me on.
Hey, no problem. We had a fantastic conversation when we first met. We got a lot of discussion out of kind of the ideas that we were bouncing off each other and kind of where you started and how everything began. And that's what I'd really like you to share starting out is what inspired you to start your business within this industry?
Honestly, man, the first thing was I started with a friend about a year and a half ago, and we saw it on TikTok TikTok, honestly. And we saw it from this guy, and it was just, we're like, all right, let's try it. And then we just took the leap and then did that. And then we found out, it was just us two, kind of working on it slowly with the sponge and squeegee. And then we started scaling and growing, and then it just was, next thing from there. I think our biggest thing for doing it was at the time, it was, we were just hustling, and it was decent money for being a couple kids in high school. And then we're like, oh yeah, we can actually really make a difference with this here in this community. I mean, I've always been passionate about entrepreneurship. I think I try to not focus on the money of it, but also the freedom that it brings me. The ability, if I want to wake up at 11, I can do that. But also, the freedom that I get to help everyone else out in our own community. And I've been able to do that with my guys. And, it's been awesome, giving free window cleanings to some old people sometimes and doing, in-kind donations to people has been awesome. And so that also inspires me every day to keep going. And just that inspired me to also start and scale because I realized, what this could be for Albuquerque, what this could be for kids my age, what this could be for, the people around me as well.
Okay, now when we spoke, you mentioned you're an outdoors person, and we kind of tapped into a little bit of how you combined kind of what you do outside of your business. How does that help you with your business? So, how is your experience in high altitude climbing shaped your mindset and approach to running a business and then scaling it as well?
Yeah, so from 9 to 14, I climbed the highest point out of 49 and 50 states with my dad, which was a really awesome experience. And, got to get to Denali next, but well, that's another great thing. But it was awesome. I think, you learn the basics, I think, of, the business you have to have, which is discipline. You got waking up at 2 a.m. in freezing cold weather to go hike 12 miles on a glacier really disciplines you, and really it's a wake up call and being exhausted and realizing, you can't just go back on anything. And I've taken, that's one of the things I think I've taken was, you gotta, on the disciplinary side of business is, sometimes you gotta wake up at 2 a.m. and you gotta go climb that mountain. You gotta go, there's no going back. If you do, if you stay still, you give up, you're lazy, there's frostbite, there's a lot of consequences to doing that. If you get too tired, you're not focused enough, you slip and fall, and there's a crevasse right there. So being aware and being, careful with your steps is what I've realized has also brought to business. Every step I take, I try to, manage that risk, but also be alert and, for being alert with, my team, being alert with my clients, my customers, just everything to make sure we make the right steps forward. Because if you make the wrong step, you don't want to slide down even more, and you're already so tired. But also, when you're climbing some of these mountains, like when I climbed Mount Rainier and Mount Hood over in Oregon and Washington, and I also climbed the highest point in Mexico, you need a guide to do that. And you need to be, you're climbing big snow fields and glaciers. And you need to, it's working as a team. You're strapped in, you're roped in with the harness around you. It's lifting each other up. You can't, if one person falls behind, everyone's going to fall behind. So it's working together. And I've taken that really into, my business is if people are, you want to bring people up, you don't want to have them fall behind and you want to grow with them. Because, that feeling of being at the top of the summit is honestly one of the greatest feelings in the world. You're tired, definitely been rough, but, when you see everyone else succeed with you, the people you brought up with you and that you're working with, that's been awesome. And I like the risk of, you're a little bit on edge about your life at some points. There's a great story I have, which is it's Bora Peak over in Idaho, highest point there. And this place called Chicken Out Ridge. It's literally, you're walking on about 5 feet and then there's 80-foot cliffs beside you. So I definitely don't want to fall, but I think that risk of that is like, oh, that's such a cool thing. Because, you don't really know if, one wrong move, one wrong step, and it's being careful. But I like that risk, and I've taken that into business. So also being aware of my risk, but also taking that risk to know that getting to that summit, which for me is, growing this company and helping out Albuquerque and leading, that's been, I think, the coolest part. And I've taken all that, which has been awesome. And it's been one of the coolest experiences of my life. So.
That's cool. Something you mentioned, the word discipline. A lot of times people don't understand that word or what it means when you have to relate it to your business and what you have going on and the things that you want to do moving forward.
Mhm.
So, give us an idea of how you use discipline and how it factored into your business when you started now and into the future as you plan to scale.
Yeah, I'll even start up a little earlier how it relates to, you're on the glacier, your feet are freezing, you can't feel it, and you got to keep moving or you get frostbite. And I think that relates to, when you're starting that business, that discipline of like, if you don't get moving, your feet are going to freeze and you got to get moving because you're going to get stagnant and you're going to get stuck. And just taking that next step which is, even if it's something small, as you're starting your LLC, you're knocking another door, something. Stop staying stagnant because if you stay stagnant, you're free. Your feet are going to get frozen. You're going to get frostbite. Is what I always say, and that's the discipline I've taken with starting my business. And I've knocked in 20-degree weather, knocking doors, and then I've also knocked in 110-degree weather. I've talked to clients. I've failed multiple times, which is I think has been a great, awesome, a awesome journey failing because I've learned so much from it. And so I think that's another thing with discipline when you're starting it is just keep going. If you don't, you're not going to, if you go back, you're just going to be in the same place you were. And then you got to have to do it all over again. And so, I always imagine there's no going back. But from when I continued to grow the company, the discipline was, I was in school, I'm 18, so I do have some good friends. And, the discipline of like, hey, like, let's go out to a party tonight. And you're like, hey, man, I've got to be up at 7 a.m. Like, sometimes don't, sometimes I'll go out with my friends, have a good time, but there's times where it's like, hey, no, man, I got to wake up at 7 a.m. I can't do that tonight. Or I've definitely missed out on plenty of hangouts and plenty of things from window cleaning, which a lot of people wouldn't think. But also, I've been able to bless my friends. I've had my friends work with me and do that. So I think that's also a benefit. And just, growing that, and it's like, oh, yeah, we're scaling, right now. I got to grind this. I got to listen to a podcast. I have a meeting with my mentor. I'm networking. And my friends are like, oh, let's go get food or let's do this. And, that's awesome. I think that's a great thing. Trust me, I do that, but I can't always get food. I can't always go party. I gotta keep my head focused on, and looking forward and scaling. That's a big thing is realizing what's my priorities are. So, is that going out with friends? Is that going to college? Is that what are my real priorities and expanding into other businesses? And that's the discipline I think I have to have is, again, do I go out tomorrow or do I go to a meeting with networking? I got to be up at 7 a.m. and going to a party and staying out till 1 on 5 hours of sleep is not going to get you more business. So that's, kind of with the scaling as well. And the discipline with trying to, I think, the doubt sometimes you get, just the naturally and the discipline with having to stick with it and be like, all right, like it's rough. We definitely have rough days and we definitely have rough times. And, from employees coming to going to, maybe we fail on a house and maybe we didn't do as good a job on this or we didn't do something. Those are rough moments, but then it's like, oh yeah, it's like you got to keep going forward on those because once we failed, we've learned so much from it, and it's like, all right, what's next? And then I think that's how I've been able to focus on the scaling part of it, is staying focused, but also balancing out my day to day and things. And I think I'm going to continue doing that in the future and realize what my true priorities are. And when you're on that mountain, your true priorities get into the summit. And I like to transfer that over. My summit is, getting to that level of entrepreneurship, getting to that level of freedom for me, and that level of support for everyone around me. And so that's my summit. And so there's a lot of work to get there, but that's where I want to be at.
Now, when it comes to, like you said, you're 18, you're building this business here in Albuquerque. When it comes to business and opportunities, growth, development, where do you see Albuquerque heading the next few years, and kind of what role do you hope to play in helping the city grow and improve as a young entrepreneur and as a business that is scaling and moving forward?
Yeah, I love Albuquerque. I know a lot of 18-year-olds do not say that, but I do. I think it's a great town. I love to go ski and, the tram, and there's lakes nearby. There's a lot to do. And there's a lot, we have culture here, which you go to Texas and it's just like there's no culture. So I think that's been awesome. I just want to take a moment to recognize Albuquerque. I think Albuquerque is going to go through a big boom. There's a lot of places where I think there's a lot of money here for, New Mexico's a very impoverished state. And there's actually, I think, more money than a lot of people think. And, I think there's going to be more places like Sawmill, places where wealthy people are going to want to spend their monies. And there's going to be need for that niche of like, oh yeah, I'm a wealthier person. Where do I go? Because there's not really a lot in town where to go. And so I think I see Albuquerque going that. I know the tech sector is really big here as well too. when I really see that booming. And I hope that I see Albuquerque, as the next Phoenix, the next Scottsdale, the LA, the 20 years ago LA, the 5 years ago or 4 years ago Phoenix, 10 years ago Denver, where they're booming and people are moving in, and we're solving problems. I think that's a big thing. We cannot solve problems here. I found out we cannot solve a problem for anyone. And I think my generation and with AI and the modernizing coming into Albuquerque, because I think we're always a little bit behind. I think we're going to be able to solve that. And I see Albuquerque being the next big boom in Albuquerque or in America, honestly. I mean, the way I want to lead that is, from my service business to window cleaning to starting other businesses, in which I'm trying to work on and grow right now. And I think the youth, supporting the youth. There's a lot of lost kids out there. I think that's a big problem. There's a lot of kids who are struggling with mental, poverty, things of that aspect. And if you can, you can get them on the right track. All it takes is one person. I want to be that person to be like, hey, like, you don't got to go do this. You don't got to go, come work with me during the day. Like, we'll get you away from that a little bit, and creating more jobs with higher paying money, all the guys in my, they're all 17 to about 22, excuse me. And, I try to pay them well, high paying jobs, something we need, people where people can, place where people can go spend their money and go enjoy themselves and afford a nice dinner and not have to worry about when the next bill is, or if they're going to be able to eat that day. So I think that's one way I can lead it, is creating these big job and growth opportunities for people from young age to even older ages in the future. And I think leading that to be just to be a good person also.
So along the lines you mentioned, as you build your company out and the contribution you want to give to Albuquerque as a whole. So then moving forward, where do you see your company in the next year to 2 years, and what goals are you focused on achieving within that time frame as you start to build this out?
Yeah, so I see, you see Sandia Window Cleaning go to about a 10-person team. I'm hoping so. I mean, being able to create some good high paying jobs for, high schoolers, get them out of, just that mentality of like doing nothing. And then, getting sales guys as well, which are commission based. So I see that in about a year to 2 years, having a fully, functioning business with sales guys, managers, people who, are also maybe opening a franchise in another state if they're willing to move. So creating other entrepreneurs as well, is a big thing, I think, too, for me at least. There's enough money and there's enough windows. If whether it's window cleaning, whether it's land, I don't know, every business, there's enough to go around. And I don't ever see the point in not supporting other businesses or other people if they want to go do that. I mean, if that means going to do a franchise with me, that's something I would love to do in the next couple of years. But kind of have it running passively for me because, I love window cleaning. It's been awesome. Great first business. But, starting another business, being able to have my window business in the next couple of years running passively, but also funding another business of mine to be able to scale that here in Albuquerque and make even a bigger difference. And so being in multiple sectors of Albuquerque, whether it's service businesses, real estate, things of that aspect, is where I want to grow. And then I think with that, I can support everyone else around me as well. So I think in the next 1 to 2 years, have a good team, passively running itself, young kids working, young kids managing, owning it, people maybe like, hey, I'm 18, maybe I don't want to go to college. I'm going to move to Phoenix and I'm going to start a franchise, and like I'm going to willing to support that. And that's kind of where I see our business going.
Okay, with all of that and the focus that you have and the depth in which you want to grow and everything else, how do you stay driven and focused, as a young entrepreneur? Like you said, you're 18, which is really awesome. How do you stay focused, especially when facing doubt, pressure, the setbacks that are just part of being an entrepreneur? How do you stay driven and focused on your goals?
Yeah, no, definitely have some doubt and some things pop up here and there. But there's a beauty in that a little bit. I found the biggest way to combat doubt is just do the work. If you're doubting yourself and you're like, "Oh, I'm not going to do well today," just go do it. You're not going to feel any better just sitting around and doubting yourself more. I've doubted myself and you're just like, "All right, same thing with climbing. You're doubting yourself, you just got to keep another step. Take another step." And as an 18-year-old, there's a lot of distractions, people, I'm headed into college and there's a lot, there's partying, there's a lot of stupid stuff, alcohol, drugs, and things of that aspect. And just, I remember where I was a couple years ago, and I remember how far I've come. I think that's the biggest thing for me. I worked at a ski shop, I worked at a tire shop. So I've worked the basic, couple basic jobs as being a teenager. And I hated being there. I just hated it. There was nothing against them, great people I met. I just hated it. It wasn't me. And I remember that. I remember that feeling I got when, I worked at the ski shop and he doubted me and he just was did not like me. And I was like, oh, I can never go to that. Like I wanted to, and just kind of feeling lost. And I was like, that I remember that every day. It's like, oh yeah, maybe I'm struggling today, but I also look to the future too, which is, how beautiful this can be and how amazing it can be. And then I take a moment for gratitude for myself. I take a moment of gratitude for like the people that have supported me because, I love being the face of it, and I love, being like, oh, going to all these meetings and being like, oh yeah, like I'm the CEO and owner. It's a great feeling, trust me. But definitely could not have done it by myself. My parents, friends, family, mentors, and everything I've grown and learned so much from. And so I wish I could put their faces all right here as well. And so I remember that, I'm doing it. They're helping me, they're supporting me, and so why am I going to let them down? I need to. That's I think my way of repaying them is, you've done so much for me. Why am I going to fail you? And just looking forward to the future. Look how I look where I've done now, and then look how much more I can do. Um, and even going back to climbing, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember how that felt when you're just sitting there and you're like, "Ah, I don't want to do this, and then you just got to keep pushing forward, and it ebbs and flows for sure. But it's great. I love it.
Okay, so at your age, with what you've been able to accomplish, what's one lesson that you've learned as a business owner that isn't taught in schools?
Ooh, yeah, I think obviously taxes. I had to file taxes for the first time. That was rough. I did not know what I was doing at all. So shout out to AI for that. Adapting. The school does not teach you how to adapt at all. It's very you sit there, you read your book, you take a quiz. It's the same kind of basic for every subject. And it's really nothing different. I mean, it is obviously in some aspects, I think more, elementary through high school, it could be like that. But I was able to, with business, it's always adapting, I think. And that's something school never really taught me. It was like, oh, yeah, you just got to do the assignments on time and turn your homework in and take the test. And that's great. I mean, I'm not against school. I think school's great for some people. Um, and I'm even going to college, but they don't teach you. They don't teach you how to adapt in high school. They don't, taxes. That's the biggest part of business is one day this might work and this day it doesn't work. And what's the even? And your employees, like, you can't just be the same old person. You can't do the same old things, or they're not going to learn. They're not going to stick with you. You got to learn to adapt and thinking outside the box. I think it's very centered thinking of just like this, that, off the book. And with business, you got to create new oceans for yourself. You got to be, there's red oceans where there's a lot of competition. There's people fighting over clients. You got to create a blue ocean. And that means, starting something new, thinking outside the box. Like, how am I going to beat this? How am I going to do that? How can my clients be happier? And I never really learned that from school. I think school was just very much, what's up to my boys, and I think that's why, don't ask my mom about my attendance senior year. So that's probably why. That's probably why I was never there. I just didn't care at all, and I graduated and maintained a good GPA for my parents, but it's very centered. And, my parents will still tell you I don't do my chores. I hated that. I hated being told what to do. I was never me, man. I hated it. They can barely get me to take out the trash, which I'm sorry, mom and dad, if you're listening. Love you, but it's just they very tell you what to do, this, that, and it's like I don't want to be told what to do. Like let me learn on my own, let me grow on my own. I want to learn from other people, but they're telling you directly what they like. They're not teaching you; they're just telling you. And I'm like, I don't want to be told. I want to be taught. And
Okay.
yeah,
So, along the lines of advice at your young age, can you give our listeners one piece of business advice that stuck with you while you've been on this journey, something that you'll just carry with you that was just really impactful?
yeah, I got a couple things. I think the first thing is I knocked doors for about 9 months with a partner of mine I used to have, and you just get very stuck in the hustle. Like the quick money, the quick money. I had to get out of that mindset and realize the scaling mindset. So I realize people are just like you're in the hustle mindset. You're just chasing the next dollar, and that's great for a little bit. You cap out at a certain amount of money though, which you can do and make. And so that's kind of the downside. But stepping into that scaling mindset of like, I'm not going to make a lot of money maybe right now, but like, where can I reinvest my money? Where can I put this money to scale? You have one truck, why are you not getting a second? Well, you have one sales guy, why are you not getting two? You got to think bigger. I always, not always, I got stuck in that for a little bit until I was like, what am I doing? I'm just like sitting here doing the same thing every day. And so think outside the box, think in the scaling mindset of how you're going to grow your business. What are you going to, if you're a photographer and you're just doing the headshots, how can you get another photographer? Can you create a course? Can you do a personal online brand? Can you sell yourself better? Can you get more people going for you? I mean, I think that's just like there's so much more in there, with AI and the internet. I mean, the world is at our hands right now. And, it's awesome. We're going to launch our first AI ad. So I'm curious to see how that is. But that's just a side note. But also, ego, I think, was a big thing. I've had to, you know, being 16, 17, you're hustling a little bit. You got a little window cleaning business. You feel on top of the world. It will come back and bite you in the butt. Let me tell you that. And I think not having an ego with what you do is the biggest thing, because if you think with your ego, you're going to think, only about yourself. I found out, and I believe in bad karma. It will come back around for sure. And just being true to yourself, and being true to people around you. And you're not, from the grocery bagger to the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, everyone's the same. And you shouldn't have the ego that you're better than anyone. You should be confident in yourself. I found out, being confident is a great thing. I'm confident in what I do. I'm confident we're the best in town. I'm confident I'm number one. But my ego, there's no reason I'm not better than anyone. I'm just here to, we're all contributing to this one big thing, the world and the economy. And why are we judging each other for that? Whether it's a grocery bagger or anything. And something I'm still, I mean, I'm still learning that ego stuff too. And that's a hard thing, being 18. And, you get ahead of yourself sometimes. And I'm still learning that. But also, not being selfless. I think doing the most for other people, that kind of relates to ego too. My mentor has helped me so, so, so much, and never asked for a dime, never asked for anything from us, and just is willing to help us. Runs a multi-million-dollar company and steps away for a couple hours a month, and just helps us out and meets with us. Met with him today, and just that's something I've learned. And giving back to the community in some aspects of anything I'm around, and just that feeling. That's something I've learned, is if when you put yourself first, you have your ego, you're gonna fail, you're gonna lose money, you're gonna, I think I learned my lesson. I crashed a car, so that was great. And my ego got ahead of me, and it was a great lesson though. And I mean, the pain I learned from that, or the pain that happened, was the greatest lesson. And it's, putting my guys first, putting my team first is.
You mentioned mentor. So for you and your business, what give us an idea of the value of having a mentor when it comes to building a business, whether you're scaling or if you're just getting started?
A mentor has been great. I have a couple mentors actually, which has been super cool. And everyone, thinks differently, works differently in every way. And for me, I found my mentor, and they're all business owners, and it's helped me, just visionary ideas, things I would have never thought about. I've implemented in my business, like how, you know, from experiences they have and things. And it's called Think Rich, Grow Rich is this book I read, and he talks about having specialized knowledge. So, what's your specialized knowledge you're going to have? So if you're a doctor, what type of doctor? What, got to know everything about it. And so I found that with mine, it's like, it's business. So let me find my specialized knowledge. And these mentors, I mean, all my mentors have been doing business for 25 plus years, and have all very successful people here in town as well. And they have that specialized knowledge. They have the experiences that I don't have. I started business a year and a half ago, and I was born like 18 years ago, 2006. Phones were in, Nokia and MySpace, so it's not that long ago. And that's, I don't know a lot. I don't, and they're teaching me what they know is the biggest thing, and humbling you. They'll humble you really hard. And they'll humble you. They'll be like, oh yeah, and unintentionally, intentionally be like, yeah, your ego's too big of you, man. You gotta shut the hell up. But unintentionally just be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna take my Lamborghini out this weekend, and you're just like, oh my god, like, and so I'm nowhere where I want to be. They push you and they keep you in check when you need to be, and I think that's the value I've had of a mentor.
That's really cool. Turner, I appreciate you taking the time and talking with us and giving us a lot of insight on how it is starting a business nowadays at your age. So when it comes to getting a hold of you, how can people find you? Social media, phone number, email, give it to us. Let us know how we can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me. My number is 505-930-4968. That's the business number as well. And you can look us up at sandiawindowcleaning.com, and then Sandia Window Cleaning on Instagram, Nextdoor, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We're all over, and you can always message us on there. We also got us on Google Business. So look us up, Sandia Window Cleaning, and then sandiawindowcleaning.com. And you can reach out, and we love to we give free quotes, and I love just helping out clients and seeing the transition of that. And so yeah, I'd
Wow.
also love to just sit down and learn from anyone. So anyone that's listening, you have a business or you don't have a business, I'd love to just sit down and meet a coffee. I'd love to, I think every person is worth a cup of coffee.
Man, I appreciate it sincerely. Well, thanks again, Turner. Much success, many blessings to you, and we will talk with you soon.